Tomorrow, we will finally have our chance to win back the honor we have lost. I shall never forget the disgrace and humiliation of these past months of retreat. The generals say that there is no shame in retreating before a superior foe if it leads to future glory. Yet how can this be when our enemy is without honor? Tomorrow they will come, and at long last we will stand our ground and look our foe in the face. We shall reclaim our lost honor with our very blood and our lives. Grieve not for me, mother, for I will soon join father in Sto-vo-kor. My only fear is that you and Ursai will be left alone in this world. See that she finds an honorable husband, worthy of our sacrifice. Chechu, Jajvam, Jajkak. In the early phases of the Dominion War, Klingon and Federation forces were forced to retreat in the face of overwhelming Dominion numbers. While it was demoralizing for Starfleet, for the Klingons it was yet more salt in an open wound. 2 years before, the Klingons had invaded and occupied much of Cardassian space, and while they initially crushed the Cardassian fleet, as time wore on, the Cardassians, using guerrilla tactics, were able to inflict high attrition rates on the Klingons, until in mid-2373, the Klingons were decisively driven out of Cardassian space by a Dominion task force. As a result, the professional arm of the Klingon military, known as the Klingon Defense Forces, was heavily depleted, losing many ships and critically experienced officers in these ultimately wasteful campaigns. And so, at the outbreak of war in 2374, the Klingon fleet was in a far weaker position compared to its Federation allies, with less than 120 ships forming the KEF, or Klingon Expeditionary Fleet, under General Martok. When the Dominion attacked, he retreated alongside his Federation allies. Meanwhile, Chancellor Gowron went about raising more Klingon fleets. However, unlike their Federation counterparts who were already rapidly mobilizing, the Klingons were far slower to respond, despite having greater numbers of ships and personnel in reserve. This was due to the fact that while the Chancellor had the authority to raise and command the Klingon Defense Forces, which was a fully professional force under his direct authority, this only accounted for a quarter of Klingon forces, the rest being made up by the fleets of the Great Houses, which were far slower to mobilize. Therefore, Gowron elected to go on without them, sending the Chancellor's 5th raiding fleet and the 4th Empress Guards to the front lines. With Martok's fleet separated from the rest of the Klingons on the central front, Gowron ordered his fleets to the Zaranite sector to confront Dominion Fleet Group Gamma, which was swarming through Federation space unchecked and threatened to divide the Klingon and Federation forces. The first engagement would be on March 12th, with birds of prey from the Empress Guards engaging Dominion patrols. A Dominion attack was believed to be imminent, and the Chancellor's raiders took up position in the Janus system, home to a major Federation starbase. They would be joined in the line by the Federation 10th Fleet at Zaranite, along with the Empress Guards at Boradis and the House Mokai Fleet at Oceanius. With Janus being a clear target for the Dominion, General Tau went about further fortifying the system. Originally colonized in the mid-23rd century, the Janus system has a population of 10 million of the native Horta, along with over 1 million Federation colonists. With numerous rare mineral deposits scattered throughout the system, it became a major economic and industrial center, supplying crucial resources to Federation shipyards. This strategic importance, combined with its proximity to the Klingon border, led to it being fortified in the late 23rd century. However, after the Khitomer Accords, these defences had been neglected and fallen into disrepair. With the threat of an imminent Dominion attack, it now fell to General Tau to turn this ancient bastion, once built to repel his forebears, into a fortress with which he would defend his ally. Fortunately, the Dominion turned their sights elsewhere, with Fleet Group Gamma instead pushing towards Vulcan, allowing General Tau more time to prepare his defences, working with Governor Tetsuya to restore the planetary defences and deploying cloaked minefields around the perimeter of the system. However, as a Klingon warrior, General Tau had very little experience and even less love of fighting defensively, and as a result put his faith in outdated tactics, assigning each of his 4 brigades to a designated quadrant in the system and deploying the minefield as a continuous sphere beyond the effective range of the weapon platforms. He also ordered his brigade commanders to exercise relentless aggression and fight for every cubic kilometre of battlespace. He also ordered his men to ignore the Federation strongpoints and regard them as a separate entity. They should not feel restricted to them nor obliged to defend them. Throughout the Janus system were a total of 32 strongpoints, each generally built around a torpedo turret, supported by 3 phaser turrets. When they were built in the 23rd century, they were believed to be utterly impenetrable, capable of repelling any spaceborne vessel. Yet some were uncertain whether they would stand up to the hitherto unstoppable Jem'hadar. By the end of March, the Dominion fleet had been held at the Vulcan border and now sought to secure its flanks, which were being continually harassed by the ever indefatigable Klingons. Jem'hadar reconnaissance patrols began probing the defences of Janus on April 1st. While they were harried by Klingon patrols, their intention was clear. It would only be a matter of time before the Dominion attacked. At 0437 on April 4th, Tau's patrols reported a large Jem'hadar fleet heading straight for the Janus system. At 0725, 40 Jem'hadar ships dropped out of warp just on the edge of the system. Rather than immediately charge into the minefield, they instead spread out along the perimeter and began firing into the minefield with pinpoint accuracy, methodically cutting the path through the invisible obstacle. Realizing what they were doing, Tau ordered his Burrell wings to attack. Unfortunately, they found no easy prey, and the Jem'hadar continued their work regardless. The birds of prey were eventually driven off by the battlecruisers. Rather than adapt his strategy, General Tau ordered another attack by Kurok's brigade, this time using a Vochar wing, playing right into the Jem'hadar's hands. As Kurok decloaked, 20 Jem'hadar ships dropped out of warp either side of his wing. Under attack from both sides, he took heavy casualties, losing 2 Vocha and 4 birds of prey before withdrawing to within the perimeter. Yet the damage was already done, with Kurok having lost the fighting core of his brigade in a wasteful attack. When the Jem'hadar completed their path through the minefield a few minutes later, he was barely able to contain the Jem'hadar, pouring through the gap. His brigade, already badly mauled, was beginning to falter. Soon after, the Dominion fleet arrived in full force, 80 ships, while 3 battle groups peeled off to continue fixing Tau's fleet. The rest poured through the gap in Kurok's quadrant, and soon enough, Kurok was overrun, and the Jem'hadar now began to engage the other brigades from behind, blowing right through the strongpoints, whose antiquated shields proved useless against the Jem'hadar polaron beams. Soon enough, Kurok's brigade broke completely. His remaining ships were scattered, and his flagship was run down and disabled. While Brigadier Kachang rallied the survivors and attempted to launch a counterattack, it was a futile gesture. With Dominion ships pouring through the gaps and swarming throughout the system, there was little he could do to turn the tide. As more and more Jem'hadar flooded their lines, he reluctantly disengaged, and General Tau ordered a full retreat, conceding yet another system to the victorious Dominion. The Klingon defeat at Janus was a further humiliation and dishonour. After 2 months of retreat and nearly a month of preparation, they still could not stop the Dominion. Yet what was most galling to many officers was the knowledge that Janus was an eminently winnable battle. They had every conceivable advantage, a strong defensive position, time to plan and prepare, and fortifications, yet General Tau, through his incompetence, had squandered all of these advantages and allowed the Dominion an easy victory. On April 8th, Brigadier Kachang made these grievances known, confronting Tau during an officer's briefing and challenging him for leadership of the fleet. The duel was short and decisive. While Tau may have been older, Klingons of his generation lacked experience, but Kachang was a veteran of the Cardassian invasion, and he easily bested Tau, taking 2 of his fingers in a disarming strike. With that, General Tau yielded, and the command of the Chancellor's 5th Raiders now passed to General Kachang. Initially, Kachang planned to make his stand at Donula, yet the Jem'hadar was still hot on their heels and continuing to advance, while his own reinforcements were still some time away. Therefore, Kachang took the difficult decision to abandon Donula and instead make his stand at Arcadia. Consisting of a G-type star with 7 orbiting planets, Arcadia, or Velen Gamma, had been a Federation member since the 23rd century. The ringed planet of Arcadia 3 was the site of an extensive mining operation, while Arcadia 5 was home to the reclusive Arcadians, a largely oceanic world dotted with small islands. It has a population of 4 billion. Ironically, the Arcadians originally joined the Federation to protect against a potential Klingon invasion, and now, less than a century later, were playing host to their Klingon guardians. This was not lost on Kachang, who remarked on this historical irony in a speech he made to both his troops and the Arcadians on April 14th. "Arise, sons of Kalis. Hear the warriors' call. Listen to the cry of the waves. To arms, brave citizens. Let us stand together. As you fight in the sea, as we fight in the sky, let sound your battle cry. Pevel, Gahabe, Chu. They shall not pass." This declaration was no mere rhetoric, but the acknowledgement of a dangerous reality. If Arcadia fell, the Dominion would cut the Federation and Klingon fleets in 2 and open the path to invade the Empire itself. With their previous defeat at Janus showing the ineffectiveness of conventional defensive tactics, General Kachang drew on his experiences during the 2372 invasion of Cardassia, in which, despite not possessing cloaking technology, the Cardassians were able to consistently ambush and deceive their Klingon invaders. Kachang augmented these tactics with his own cloak-equipped ships. These tactics were first put to the test on April 14th as a Dominion recon sortie entered the system. Rather than chase off the Jem'hadar, they allowed them to conduct their reconnaissance. After completing their preliminary scans, the Jem'hadar withdrew. 6 hours later, another reconnaissance sortie arrived, yet this time Kachang decided to greet them with a patrol of his own, specifically sending ships that had previously fought at Janus to intercept them. While the Jem'hadar could have probably destroyed the patrol, with many of the ships still damaged, their mission was reconnaissance, and so they withdrew, having seen the poor state of the Klingon fleet. Subsequent reconnaissance by the Jem'hadar confirmed this hypothesis, either encountering no resistance or token resistance by a largely broken fleet. And so, on April 16th, the Dominion attacked in force, with 20 ships arriving in the system at 0100. Anticipating a largely broken Klingon fleet, the Dominion fanned out and began employing tachyon sweeps to sniff out the Klingons. Soon enough, they detected several cloaked ships in the vicinity of Arcadia 7. Upon realizing that they were detected, the cloaked ships retreated into the planetary moons. The Jem'hadar gave chase, however their battlecruisers could not keep up with this high-speed pursuit, and suddenly, it was the Jem'hadar who were being pursued, with a wing of Barrels appearing on their tail. Rather than use their cloaking device, which the Dominion could detect, they had instead landed their ships in the craters of the moons and powered down their systems, making them far harder to detect. Without the cover of their larger battlecruisers, and with the abundant cover provided by the moons, the Jem'hadar fighters were outmaneuvered by the Klingon birds of prey, taking heavy losses. Meanwhile, the Dominion cruisers trying to support came under attack from Klingon Watchers and Katingas, which had been hiding inside the gas giant, getting off a full volley before the Dominion could react, destroying one of the cruisers. While the Dominion did return fire, they took further damage. The Vorta, realizing that his reconnaissance had failed, ordered a retreat. Realizing that the Klingons had taken steps to deceive his reconnaissance units, and that they were in a stronger position than initially thought, he concluded that he should try to force the Klingons' hand by attacking Arcadia 5 directly. Yet this was extremely risky. As a major Federation world, Arcadia would have surface defenses capable of repelling starships. Therefore, he ordered his fighters to warp rush the planet, dropping out of warp inside the gravity well, giving the defenders minimal time to react before breaching the atmosphere, only losing one ship to surface fire. They then deployed Jem'hadar aquatic assault troops, who were to locate and designate the shield generators and torpedo batteries hidden underwater, which would then be destroyed by the Dominion fighters from the air. Kachang scrambled to respond, deploying a Barrel wing to counter the Jem'hadar. Despite these quick reactions, the Jem'hadar managed to make significant gains. While the Arcadian volunteers fought bravely, they were no match for the genetically engineered soldiers of the Dominion. By the time the birds of prey swooped into the atmosphere, 4 defense facilities had been destroyed, creating a blind spot in the planetary defenses. And while the more agile Klingon Barrels were able to destroy most of the Jem'hadar in atmospheric dogfights, the Jem'hadar had achieved their goal, creating a portion of battlespace that the Klingons were obliged to defend. And so, when the Dominion fleet returned with 100 ships, Kachang ordered 2 brigades to cover the blind spot. Initially outnumbered, they would face the full force of the Dominion fleet and began to take casualties. And yet suddenly, just as they were about to break through, the Dominion retreated, as Kachang's 2 other brigades had launched a raid on the Dominion base at Capella, along with elements of the House Kultan fleet, forcing the Dominion to recall its forces. By April 19th, Kachang was faced with 2 Dominion fleets, stationed at Capella and Danula respectively. And while previously he had enjoyed the support of the other Klingon fleets, by this time they had all disengaged from the front lines to partake in another operation, though they did detach the slower elements of their fleets. As a result, Kachang's fleet saw an exponential increase in firepower, gaining a total of 43 ships, on top of his replenished 4 brigades. And while his force was not as agile compared to other Klingon fleets, it was ideal for carrying out a defense, as he would now face the full force of the Dominion. The Vorta, fearing another Klingon counterattack, sought a more permanent foothold in the Arcadia system, allowing him to more effectively track and engage the Klingon fleet. The site chosen was Arcadia 4. Its orbit placed it in prime striking position of the inhabited Arcadia 3 and 5, but itself was a small barren rock, completely uninhabited and thus easy to conquer. The attack began on April 21st with the Dominion fleet from Capella leading the attack, splitting into 2 groups, attacking Arcadia 3 and 5, forcing Kachang to commit his forces. Behind this screen, the Dominion fleet from Danula entered the system and, like clockwork, deployed EVA teams before lowering a modular base from orbit. While Kachang was aware of what the Dominion were doing, he was unable to stop it, with his heavier ships fending off repeated hit-and-run attacks against the planets, and the birds of prey unable to break through the Dominion fighter screen. In just 6 hours, the Dominion had successfully deployed a base on Arcadia 4, with a surface umbrella shield under which Dominion fighters could take refuge and limited defensive battery, it gave the Dominion its sorely needed foothold in the system. Not wishing to allow the Dominion any more forward momentum, K'Chang ordered 2 of his brigades to counterattack. The Dominion happily greeted this assault, and ferocious fighting broke out, both in space and on the surface, as Klingon EVA units deployed from their birds of prey, assaulting the Dominion base. To the Dominion, it appeared that they had successfully lured K'Chang into a reckless act of bravado, and they could now destroy him in a pitched battle, not realizing what the rest of K'Chang's fleet was doing. 2 hours later, K'Chang ordered his 2 other brigades to join battle with the enemy. With 60 Klingon ships joining the fray, the Vorta called for reinforcements, which soon arrived, retaking the advantage and badly mauling K'Chang's brigades. Outnumbered and taking casualties, the Klingons retreated to Arcadia 5. Sensing his chance to finish K'Chang once and for all, the Vorta ordered a pursuit with all the ships at his command, exactly as K'Chang hoped. At 10:08, a Jem'hadar fighter leading the pursuit struck a mine. The Dominion fleet, using their anti-proton scans, realized that the Klingons had laid a minefield, through which they hoped to evade the Dominion. They were sadly mistaken. Unfazed, the Dominion continued their pursuit, easily navigating their way through the minefield, and stayed hot on the heels of the Klingons. Yet when the Dominion vanguard reached the far side of the field, they were forced through a narrow gap, large enough only for 1 ship at a time. As they emerged, 43 Klingon ships, including the Negvar, decloaked and unleashed a ferocious volley, devastating the Dominion vanguard. It suddenly became clear to the Vorta that they had been lured into a conical minefield, with their ships being funneled into a killing zone. Yet as he turned to flee, they once again came under attack by K'Chang's brigades, who had circled back, attempting to herd the Dominion down this lethal funnel. With the command ship destroyed, the Dominion fleet soon fell into complete disarray, with various ships fighting to turn round, resulting in ships striking mines or crashing into each other. Others, realizing there was little else to be done, elected to charge through the funnel and attempt a suicide run on the Klingon warships, though this came to little success, with most being gunned down before they could reach their targets. While some Jem'hadar managed to escape, after 12 hours of slaughter, the Klingons had destroyed 49 Dominion ships. Knowing that if left alone, the Jem'hadar would simply replenish their forces, K'Chang attacked Arcadia 4 the next day, with his 2 strongest brigades clearing a path through the Dominion fleet, creating an opening for the Negvar, which demolished the base with just 2 volleys of its siege guns. And with that, the Dominion retreated back to their bases at Tanuga and Danula. And so K'Chang breathed a sigh of relief, as he had held Arcadia, albeit at great cost, having lost 66 ships in 7 days of battle, and over 26,000 warriors had died an honourable death. While they would now be in Sto-vo-kor, they would be sorely missed by the living, who would not yet see the end of this war. Yet their sacrifice was not in vain, buying with their lives the honour of the fleet and saving not only the people of Arcadia, but billions more from Dominion tyranny, and fulfilling their vow, Pev Dahabe Chu, with their lives. For there can be no greater honour among human and Klingon alike than to give one's life defending the defenceless.